This is the Inkpulp podcast. This is the Inkpulp podcast. Comics, hip hop, life. Welcome back to the Inkpulp podcast. Sorry for the little hiatus, but if you're a fan of this, you're used to these little breaks as I readjust the podcast, change up the show. Sometimes it's every year, sometimes it's every few years, but I believe in growth, I believe in change, I believe in keeping this organic. And this is a big change. And I think last couple seasons were leading into some thought processes I'm going to drop on you. When I started this podcast, the very first episode, the very first intro, I told a story about me and my son in Disney World. And I'm going to recap it quick. I'm not going to do the long, extended version. But this was at a time where my son, Zach, was, how old was he? He was probably about 6, I guess. And he was just maybe 5, maybe 4, around that age. He at the time was obsessed with Lilo and Stitch in particular. And going to Disney World, he was all about Stitch. And while we were doing the Hollywood Studios portion of it, there was an area for animation, and you could take like a little drawing class with one of the animators. And so we did that, and it was how to draw Stitch. So he was real excited. So we sat down and we followed the step-by-step how to draw Stitch. Well, I saw him getting very, very, very frustrated as he was going because it wasn't coming out the way he liked it. And I'm in touch with that, being an artist. When shit's not coming out the way you like it, it's frustrating. But at the time, I chose to use that moment to define myself and to define this podcast. And I said, at that moment, I knew he had the curse. And I looked at having this gift, this interest, this passion, this ability as a curse. And I didn't mean it entirely in a bad way. What I meant was the curse was you're doomed to be unhappy with the work you produce. And that launched my podcast. And that launched my attitude through the podcast. It launched my frequency, my frequency through the podcast. And what I've come to learn and know about frequencies is frequencies attract like frequencies. I was at a low frequency, and the podcast attracted a lot of low frequency energy. And a lot of you fans remember this. And I struggled for years from that point and used the podcast as an outlet of therapy, as an outlet of frustration, but I started to realize I was defining my own negative reality with this frequency I had established. And it carried. And as you know, if you've listened, the past few years have been a very expansive period of growth for myself. And I've read and listened to a lot of books about self-help, a lot of books about Eastern philosophy, ideology, and stuff like that. So I was listening to a book recently that really kind of woke me up. Like if I've been in the transitional phase from being low frequency to high frequency over the past few years, this was the book that turned on the lights for me and let me see what I had built around myself. And this book is called Big Magic. And the author, it's a book about fear in the creative process. And the author talks about having this creative side to oneself, this need to make things. She keeps saying that, make things, and I'm in tune with that because that's me. I just want to make things. It's art. When I cook, I don't just make dinner, I create and I make dinner, and I like to make things. I like this podcast. I get to make this. I have Inkpulp instruction, which I'll talk about at the end of this little story. I've made that. I just like making things. But she talks about this, having that in you, in your DNA, in your soul, and she calls it magic. And there's a chapter where she talks about artist as the martyr. And when she describes all of that, it really hit home. Because what was in that description was the idea of the cursed artist. The idea of the tortured artist. And I get that with the creative mind comes creative thought processes. Comes sometimes depression, sometimes anxiety, sometimes turmoil. And we spend a lot of time in our heads, so I can understand that. But what I'm learning now is how to channel and change frequencies and how to channel more positivity versus negativity. And she talks a lot about a lot of things that I have been stuck in and complaining or talking about on the podcast over the years, especially in the early days. She talks about making your creativity your living and the troubles that can lead to. And it was me. Like, this book was just like, whoa. And I listened to it and it just woke me up. So this is the first podcast of the new wave. So I want to reestablish where I started. If I started talking about the curse, I now want to talk about the magic or the gift. And, you know, I remember a Instagram post from Imani of the Pharcyde, and he had said, I don't remember the exact words, I'm going to butcher it, but he had said, if you make something where nothing else existed, whether it be music or art, if you take something from the ether where there's a negative space, this sound if you're making music, or this drawing if you're making a piece of art, didn't exist before you made it, then you're a fucking wizard. And you're magic. And I think that's a really nice thing a nice way of looking at this. A positive way of looking at this. A powerful way of looking at this. So I want to reset right now in the first podcast of 2021, episode 41 of the Inkpulp podcast. And I want to reset it with that positive idea. We are magicians, we are magic, we are creators. And whatever it is, all of us are. Some of us create through cooking. Some of us create through whatever it is you're doing. If you're enjoying it and it's tapping into some magic in you or some creativity in you, keep rocking that shit. So that's what this is about, the new tone, the new shift. Now, what you're going to notice on the podcast now is it's much shorter. I used to go on for a good, anywhere from an hour and a half to 3 hours sometimes with a podcast. What I'm doing now is I like to make things, I said that, and I'm making a lot of things right now. And I do enjoy making this podcast. But I want to make it in a way that is more efficient in terms of getting it done, more efficient in terms of reaching a wider audience. And I've learned about this 10-minute sweet spot on YouTube. So I'm going for 10 minutes here. My episodes are going to be very focused on a few things, a lot on instruction. that is a big part of my business right now, and a big part of my brand is bringing the teacher in me back as I make things and teaching you how to make things better. So I'm going to be having lessons on here. I'm going to be dissecting some comic book, educational comic book, I don't even know how to say it. I'll be breaking down comic books in an educational, not a critical means, but to teach you, like, I'll take a page from a book and I'll go through it and talk about page design, or I'll go through and talk about storytelling, or I'll take an artist and talk about figure drawing, shit like that. That's going to be one way of doing it, and that's going to be dope. I'm going to have time-lapse films of me drawing and painting with voiceovers explaining what I'm doing as I go, again, with the idea of instruction behind it. I'm going to have podcasts like this where I do have my monologues. I'll have intros, they'll be short, but I'm going to, as you know from listening, I've got shit to say, and I'm going to say it. And those will be separate episodes. And while I'm doing all this year, I'm going to be getting back to the interview, which is where I started. And last year, I started the Inkpulp podcast after Inkpulp audio. And it was combined with filming, drawing, and conversation at once. And what I found was, I know I'm a good artist, and I know I'm a really good interviewer. So I know those two things I'm really good at. Doing them at the same time, they both suffer. And I was not thrilled with the results. I wasn't unhappy, but I wasn't thrilled. And I was always very thrilled with the interviews I did. And I think that's a skill and a gift I have as well, as a good interviewer. But my interviews are going to come back with video footage. And they're going to feel more like a mini show than just a sit-down and interview. So while I'm navigating that, this is what I'm going to be doing. And those, as I can do them, I'll start to drop them. So look forward to all that stuff. Inkpulp Instruction is live right now. I have finally launched it. I've been talking about it all last year. I built it through COVID, and it's out. There's 2 episodes out right now, with a new one coming out every other month. They're priced at $100 an episode for now. That's like an intro price. It'll probably go up a bit eventually. But please go to inkpulpinstruction.com. Just check out that website. It's crazy awesome. It's such a dope website, and I'm so happy with it. I'm so proud of this website. I've got Geek Powered Studios behind me handling the website and handling the marketing, and they're aces. So I'm really enjoying that. I'm going to wrap it up here because we're just past the 10-minute mark, and I don't want to go too long. But yeah, so please just go to inkpulpinstruction.com, and it's going to, there's a few areas where it says, please give us your email in exchange for a free lesson. Sign up, because the Inkpulp newsletter will be coming out, and it's right now focused Inkpulp Instruction, but as we move forward, I'm going to be incorporating elements of the podcast, elements of my art, elements of everything Inkpulp into this newsletter. So we'll get there. All right? So welcome back. Come on this journey with me. And with these short little episodes, they should be really easy to watch. So let's have some fucking fun. Peace. This is the Inkpulp podcast. This is the Inkpulp podcast. Comics, hip hop, life.